Would you please welcome up on stage Andrew Grill.
The theme for today really has been about disruption and learning new things. And I don't know about you, but my head is exploding from all the new things that I've learned today. So it's great to be among you all. I was asked last night how I started my disruptive journey. And I said actually it was 40 years ago in Adelaide, Australia in 1978. I was in grade 5 and I was the child who had a separate desk next to the teacher because I was always disrupting. So I've actually been disrupting before it was fashionable. And this afternoon I want to give you a sense of how you can turn disruption into an advantage. We've heard lots of facts and figures today. Let me throw another one up to you. Since 2000, 52% of the Fortune 500 have been destroyed because of digital disruption. And there will be many more. And I don't want you or your customers to be anywhere near that. So if you remember nothing else from my talk this afternoon, I want you to disrupt yourselves before you're disrupted. Think about that. Now, normally I would talk at this point about this man, John Kyron, who was the CEO of Deutsche Bank. He famously said, if his staff were acting like robots, then they'd be replaced by robots. But 2 weeks ago, he was replaced. Not by a robot, but the board lost confidence in what he was doing. And even today, there's talk that Deutsche are about to let 10,000 people go. So across all industries, we're seeing disruption happening left, right, and centre. Now, normally, if you would want to look far in advance to see what the world might look like and what you should prepare for, you would engage a futurist. And my favourite futurist is Arthur C. Clarke. Who's heard of Arthur C. Clarke? 50 years ago, he wrote and co-authored Space Odyssey 2001. That movie is now 50 years old. And in 1974, an Australian journalist spoke to Arthur and he said, you know, what will the world be like in 2001? Here's what he had to say.
Well, with that movie, 2001, you're projecting us into the 21st century. I brought along my son Jonathan, who in the year 2001 will be the same age as I am now. Maybe he will be better adjusted to this kind of world that you're trying to portray.
The big difference when he grows up, in fact, if we wanted to wait for the year 2001, is that he will have in his own house, not a computer as big as this, but at least a console through which he can talk to his friendly local computer and get all the information he needs for his everyday life, like his bank statements, his theatre reservations, all the information you need in the course of living in a complex modern society. This will be in a compact form in his own house. He'll have a television screen like these here and a keyboard, and he'll talk to the computer, get information from it, and he'll take it as much for granted as we take the telephone.
I wonder though, what sort of a life would it be like in social terms? I mean, if our whole life is built around the computer, do we become a computer-dependent society and computer-independent individuals? In
some ways, but they'll also enrich our society because it'll make it possible for us to live really anywhere we like. Any businessman and executive could live almost anywhere on Earth and still do his business through a device like this. And this is a wonderful thing. It means we wanted to be stuck in cities, we better live out in the country or wherever we please and still carry on complete interaction with human beings as well as with other computers.
Now, I don't know about you, but I think Arthur got it pretty right. He able to predict what we would be doing in terms of computers. We could work away from home, we could work anywhere in the world. I think the only thing he didn't predict was the iPhone 10. But Arthur, you see, was looking 30 years in the future. You don't have 30 years. You don't have 30 months, you may not have 30 weeks. You need to know now, next week, what do you do to close the quarter? What do you do to get revenue in the door? And so what you need is a practical futurist, and that's what I am. And every time I speak, I have at least one, often many people that contact me days or weeks after saying, you know what? We did one of those things you suggested we do, and it's made a difference. So I want you to leave today, tonight, to go home, tomorrow, over the weekend, to be able to put in place some of the things I've been talking about rather than having to wait for 30 years. But if you're to believe anything I'm saying this afternoon, you probably need to be aware of my digital credentials. Why have I been asked to stand up here between you and drinks and talk about the future and disruption? Anyone know what this is? Yeah, a few people. The Sinclair ZX80, that was my first computer back in 1980. It had 1K of RAM, 4K of ROM, and I learned how to program BASIC back in 1980. And my daughter Madeline and I were at the Science Museum a while ago and we walked past this display case and behind it was the Apple II and the Sinclair ZX80. And Madeline turned to me, she said, Daddy, isn't that your computer you talk about all the time? Yeah. But it's behind a glass case in a museum. You must be really old. Yes, Madeline, I'm really old. Who remembers this noise? Yeah, not so long ago, we were hoping and hoping and hoping. Is it going to connect? Yes. For those millennials in the audience, that's a 300 bit per second modem. It's not a fax. And if you don't know what a fax is, see me afterwards. But I was online in 1983. I was dialing up things like this, bulletin boards. I would dial up and leave a message, we now call it email. And then hours later, I'd ring back to see if my friends had left me messages. And I knew I was hooked on this online thing back in 1983 when my father had to get a second phone line because I was always online and no one could get through. But I'd been living in your world for a long time also. Back in 2001 in Australia, I was working for Telstra, the big telecommunications company, and we were doing ASP. We were putting Microsoft Office over Citrix thin clients and selling it as an ASP model. And back in 2001, this is pretty groundbreaking, the fact that we could deliver non-physical software over the internet, which was probably a little bit more than dial-up. It might have been ADSL. So I've been in your world for a while, and I'll give you some examples of how I'm actively teaching myself how to be better educated on what the opportunities are with cloud. But if I'm to talk about disruption, I want to talk about why I think disruption happens. I think disruption happens because of three main forces. First of all, there are high profits. And that's the case in the taxi industry, the media industry, the hotel industry. Disruptors see these high profits and say, we would like some of that. And you might be thinking also, some of the industries that you work in, there are massively high profits and you'd like to share in that. Secondly, the technology is there. The fact that I can stand here on stage and order a pizza or a parcel to where I am and pay for it on my phone, we take for granted. But these disruptors need technology like cloud computing, like mobile computing, to be able to realise this. And thirdly, consumers demand it. I don't know about you, I can't remember the last time I booked an airline ticket and wasn't able to choose my seat. Conversely, I travel a lot, and with Hilton hotels, I'm able to choose my room the night before. And when I get there, I use my Hilton app through Bluetooth, and it unlocks the door in most Hilton hotels. I've got to tell you, when I went to the San Francisco Hilton one evening, 11 o'clock at night, there were 50 or 60 people waiting at the check-in desk, and I went straight to my room and unlocked it. I thought, I'm saving 30 or 40 minutes. I'm not going back to the old way. So think about your own business and think about your company and your clients' businesses. Where are these three forces at work, and where can we use that as an advantage, and where could we be disrupted? And I think a lot of companies are realising they've reached the peak. So Rupert Murdoch in Australia, he's an Australian, he's realised that his business has reached a peak, and so he's looking to sell it to Disney or Comcast. He realises he's reached the peak, and the Netflix of the world are making it harder and harder for him to make money. Conversely, in Australia, Westfield, the big chain of shopping malls, Frank Lowy has also decided to sell. He thinks he's reached a peak. Online shopping is hitting hard. He's getting out at the peak of his business. And we'll see more and more examples where these businesses are being actively disrupted. So I want to talk about some of the different disruptors, and I want to see if you can guess which one I'm going to talk about. So if I give you the number 63,990, any ideas who that might be? Okay. Another clue. 2 pizzas. Any clues? Any idea? That will become evident in a minute. What about this graph? Does this give you any clue who I'm talking about? No? Another clue? Amazon. Amazon's share price over the last 20 years has grown 63,990%. They're doing something right. I know they compete in some places with AWS, but I want you to look at what Amazon is doing and why they have been so successful. And I looked around to try and break down why it is that Amazon has cracked a number of these models. And I found an interview, which I'm going to play in a second, with Warren Buffett. And Warren was famously asked why he doesn't invest in Amazon. And his one-word answer was stupidity. But looking a little further, Warren talked about why he believes Jeff Bezos is so smart. Let's take a listen.
With Amazon, he said, we needed the internet. Somebody else spent billions of dollars developing it, but it wouldn't have worked without the internet. He said we needed transportation. Somebody else had already built railroads and UPS and all of that sort of thing. And he said we needed payment systems. That would take billions of dollars to build, but that had already been done by Visa and all along the line. So he took 3 huge requirements where the other guys had spent the money, and then he combined them in a way that he didn't have to spend the money. I was impressed with Jeff early. I never thought he could pull off what he did. And what's really, I mean, I thought he could pull off something, but on the scale that has happened, I mean, it's changed your behavior, you know, it's changed everybody in the office's behavior. And the remarkable thing about Jeff, and everything else, is he's He's done it in two industries almost simultaneously that really don't have that much connection. I've never seen any person develop two really important industries at the same time. Here you take cloud services. He thought he would have 2 years of runway. He got 7 years. You do not want to give Jeff Bezos a 7-year head start
before the competitors jumped in
any
on cloud
economic
services.
race. So the same time he's shaking up the whole retail world, he's also shaking up the IT world simultaneously, and I take my hat off to him.
I think Warren really articulates why Amazon's been so successful, and we all know about AWS, the fact that he had spare server capacity. He was smart enough to say, how can I rent this to people? But think about your own industries, your own customers. What are the things that you don't need to pay for and are already there and you can actually leverage? And think back to the 3 forces disruptive model. And of course, Amazon's moved into where they can deliver the parcel into your home using smart locks and a camera, solving the last mile problem. And if you don't want the parcel delivered at home, there is a trial in the US with Volvo and GE. It'll deliver it to the boot of your car. And I was at a conference last week on logistics and we were picking this apart. Think about the logistics for this. You've got to put a parcel on a truck and you're not sure where the delivery point will be because the car can move. That is quite amazing. The 2 pizzas, anyone know the 2 pizza rule? Jeff Bezos has a 2 pizza rule. If you can't feed your team with 2 pizzas, it's too big. Now, that may be a little bit uncomfortable because you might go, if we only had 2 pizzas, someone would go hungry. But he said that because he feels that if you have more people than can be fed with 2 pizzas, you get groupthink. And you get the thing called the highest paid person's opinion. And you don't get innovation, you just get people doing the same old, same old. So whether you agree or disagree with Jeff's 2 pizza model, he's doing okay, so he's doing something right. But disruption is everywhere. Who here uses WhatsApp? Most people? Guess how many WhatsApp get sent every day? Throw out a number. 30 million? Try 64 billion. Every single day on one network and one app. Let's compare that to SMS around the world, 20 billion. So WhatsApp is more than 3 times what is happening on every SMS network. That's massive disruption. Why? WhatsApp removed the friction. It was easy. It was low cost, so people used it. And the other examples that are used around disruption, in fact, some of them are overused. The Uber example is the most overused example of disruptors. So I'm going to disrupt the way you talk about Uber and talk about how they had to pivot. Uber started life as a limo sharing app. Travis and his co-founder were at Le Web in Paris several years ago, and they thought, wouldn't it be great if we could get a limo to come where we are right now? Then they realised the addressable market for people needing limos wasn't very big, and they had to pivot. And we all know the Uber story. Airbnb, who knows where they got their name, where the air comes from? Air mattresses. They started life in the US looking at homes that had a spare room with a blow-up mattress. Airbnb. They also had to pivot. They realised there weren't that many homes in the US that had a spare room and a blow-up mattress. They had to pivot. And our friends at Netflix realised that they didn't have to always send out DVDs in the mail. Those millennials in the room, there used to be a company called Blockbuster. And you would have to take your VHS tape back, or you got fined. And if you didn't rewind the tape, they fined you $3. And I thought that was quite unfair because I hadn't rewound the tape. But Netflix started using cloud service and realised they could start streaming things and their business wouldn't exist if it wasn't for cloud. But they've pivoted again. They've become a disruptor. They're dropping $8 billion a year on original content. And the other day, I was watching the program called Cold Feet. It had come back after 10 years on ITV. It was a few months ago. And I watched it, 9 o'clock appointment viewing, and about 14 minutes into the show stopped and there were these messages. Oh, that's an ad. Because I have Netflix and I pay for Spotify, I don't see ads. I have ad blockers, I don't see or hear ads. And so it was quite strange after probably a year or two of not seeing an ad to see something completely irrelevant and not what I was expecting. But we're going to see a lot more of that. So let's look at some of the new disruptors. Who knows about a company called Trove? Okay, this is a really interesting one. This is what Trove does in 60 seconds.
I'm leaving my house now. And as I step outside, all of these things with me are fully insured against loss or damage, instantly. That trick I just showed you, that's Trove. Trove is smart insurance. Unlike blanket policies that cover everything at once, Trove helps me protect just the things I care about. All I have to do is swipe to protect. So if anything happens, just about anything you can imagine, I know my camera's covered. Trove makes it easy to file a claim through the app. I just answer these questions, and Trove handles the rest. And every time I leave my house, things like my laptop and phone aren't protected. Trove puts me in control of the things I care about, and that's really smart.
So who would use a service like that? A few people? Yeah, it's actually live in the UK and in Australia and soon to be the US. But what Trove does is it removes the friction around buying and claiming insurance. And late last year, I was at an insurance conference giving a similar talk, and I gave Trove as the example. And the panel straight after me were full of CEOs of all these companies, and they said, well, we're not really worried about Trove. But here's what was interesting. I was standing off stage with all of the 2 ICs and all the people that reported to those CEOs standing next to me, and they said, we're really worried about the Troves. Because they fixed the problem, and so people are going to move towards that. So we'll talk in a moment about disruptive innovation, but sometimes you think, oh, the customers, they don't want that. If I told you 20 years ago you had to carry around a piece of plastic with you, you'd go, Andrew, you bonkers. Why would I do that? Name me a person who doesn't carry around 1, if not 2 pieces of plastic, because we've worked out how it makes our life and our business easier. And I saw this in the newspaper only yesterday. You can actually have this latest movie, download and keep it. Oh, by the way, it's also available on physical media as well. They've swapped it around. It's basically, it's cloud first, it's download first. You can actually have it now rather than having to wait for the physical product. But all industries are being disrupted. Deloitte in Australia did a great report called Short Fuse, Big Bang. They looked at all industries. Along the bottom is the fuse, how long until these industries are disrupted. Along the vertical is the bang, how big will it be? Let's look at short fuse, big bang. Any of you represented or have these customers, or are you in these industries? Well, there's a problem with this graph. This graph was from 2012. It's already happened. These industries have already been disrupted. In fact, PwC said that inaction and actually not worrying about disruption can be more damaging than disruption itself. Some of these industries have a little bit longer to go before they're massively impacted. So if your company is sitting around going, we don't have to worry about this yet, you do. You see, in every organisation there are 3 types of people. There are prayers, stayers and players. The prayers are just hoping this is going away. They're either near retirement or they're near leaving the company. The stayers are saying, we don't know what's going on, but we'll just have to stay the course. And the players are people like you that lean forward, that come to these conferences, that want to learn and want to understand how they can disrupt themselves before they're disrupted. So looking as an outsider at the growth drivers in your industry, I think there are a number of things that are happening that can really help grow your industry and grow your business. There are all the X-tech, so there's FinTech and MarTech and InsurTech, and you should make sure that you know about these different services and what they're doing and why they're disrupting. So InsurTech, Trove is part of InsurTech, and there's PropTech as well. With MarTech, there are now about 6,300 different MarTech companies around the world, and it's growing all the time. And they are hungry for the services that you can provide. So if I was you, I would be learning more about what are these companies like the Troves, like the other ones, what are they needing and what are they doing? And let's get a 1 step ahead so that they don't come searching for the services, you actually go to them with a proposition. And another thing that's also going to help your industry is the gig economy. Now, it's not all about Deliveroo bicycle riders. I'm in the gig economy. I'm an independent consultant and I don't work for the same company 5 days a week. I rent my time out. And so I think in the future, many of you in this room will go, you know what, if I had a choice between working 5 days a week for one company or 3 for one and 2 for the other, I would actually like that, which means companies are going to have to rejig the way the place and the style of work happens, and the future of work will be very, very different. And blockchain, I could do a whole talk on blockchain. It's not about Bitcoin, it's about distributed ledger, and you need these services to make them run. So these technologies, these terminologies, I want you to get up to speed with what they mean and where are the stars and where will people be able to use your services. We also think about IoT. I mean, IoT lives and breathes in the cloud. And we're going to see more and more, and we heard a bit more about IoT today. But I think 2018 is all about regulated disruption. There are 2 major things happening this year that may seem like a headache, but are actually an opportunity for all of you. The first of all is open banking, also called PSD2. This is forcing banks in Europe to open up their services with APIs, application programming interfaces. And when I asked 2 of the big banks in the UK if they would have done this if they weren't regulated, they said, of course not. It's expensive and it's a pain in the neck. But for consumers, it means now that those FinTech and InsurTech companies can easily access my data with permission. So even HSBC, an existing bank, is offering what they call HSBC Beta. And you can see I've got my HSBC stuff in there, but also I've got Barclays and I can put other things in there. And it means I can start sending my data off to someone who is smarter than my bank to process that and actually tell me how I might save. The second piece of regulation is happening tomorrow. Who here does not know about GDPR? Okay, no hands. I kid you not. Last week I had a few hands. A few weeks before there are more hands. GDPR is happening tomorrow whether you like it or not. Some of us seeing it as a headache, and I've lost count of the number of emails I've received where people have told me magically they're changing their privacy policy because we care about your privacy. It's actually been in effect 2 years, but only the day before we bothered to say we're going to change it, brackets, or we'll get fined 4% of global revenue. So I see GDPR as a huge opportunity. The reason it's there is because the Data Protection Act is 20 years old and it is not fit for purpose. Unfortunately, many marketers have not kept up. They've said, yeah, we don't care if we spam people. And the intensity of some of these emails that I've got and you've got, please stay with us. You can have a free t-shirt if you stay with us and we can still send you the stuff you never actually ever wanted. I think there's going to be a huge, huge opportunity for marketers to get it right. And I think the control will start passing back to the consumer. And here's why. A couple of years ago, a website called howmuch.net looked at what is the value of me to these services based on advertising revenue. And if you scan your eye over some of those services, the first question is, where's my check? These services basically are for free because there's not a fair value exchange. And recently with what we saw with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, and only 2 days ago, Mark Zuckerberg gave you a masterclass on how not to answer difficult questions. Did anyone see that? Mark had an hour. At the end of the hour, he said, we're actually 15 minutes over and I've got a plane to catch. Can you hurry it up? And he didn't actually answer all the questions. It was a masterclass. He's on the back foot because his business relies 85 or 90% on advertising. And when we as consumers realise that we want some of that back, it is going to be a very different landscape. And so I think GDPR should be seen as an opportunity and you can actually stay ahead. Because what I think will happen, and we talked about it a bit this morning, the notion of a digital agent will happen. So with GDPR and with PSD2, open banking, now I've got machine-to-machine connection with all of these services that I use. And I think what will happen is, in the not-too-distant future, I will have a digital agent. It will go out and do digital deals. So let me give you an example. My insurance is due in November. Now, my digital agent knows that because it knows all about me. So it goes out and does a digital deal and looks for what other options are out there. I'm not seeing any of this. I've outsourced it to my digital agent. It's an AI-powered agent, maybe Cortana or something like that. One of the digital deals says that if I give my Fitbit health information, I will get a 40% discount. Now, my digital agent knows that's within my tolerance and I want a deal like that. So it automatically sends a one-time hash of my data off to the insurer and I get a message saying it's already been bought. Now, those of you lucky enough to have a personal or an executive assistant, they may do some of that stuff for you if you ask them nicely. And they know all about your preferences and what you like and where you shop and everything else. But the problem is the last mile. So let's say, for example, I want my hair cut. My hairdresser doesn't have an API. And 2 weeks ago at the Google I/O conference, they solved the last mile problem. What I'm about to show you, on the left-hand side is AI, on the right-hand side is a human.
How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now. Okay, we have a 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
When I saw that, that blew my mind. Now, we heard from Cortana this morning is doing similar things, but it all points to the fact that in the near future, AI will actually take over our life. And we won't be writing ads for humans, we'll be writing ads for robots because we won't see ads. And there'll be a fair value exchange, and our digital AI will look after that. And we're in this AI API economy where everything will actually be a machine-to-machine interface. So Cortana and Google Duplex, which is what that is called, will help actually solve that. And when the API comes out for those services, you should start playing with them to see what you could do to maybe automate some of your own internal processes. But why not stay one step ahead and help educate your clients about all this new stuff coming out? Because you need to stay ahead of the disruptors. And this is where I need you to invest some of your own time in reskilling and education of your own understanding of these things. Now, my mantra for years has been, to get digital, you need to be digital. And by that I mean you have to go and play with things. So a couple of years ago, I wanted to know more about IoT, Internet of Things. I wanted to educate myself. I went to Wikipedia, looked at a few things online, and I found this kit that I could buy for £30 from Premier Farnell. It allowed me basically, here it is, it's a little doobie, we'll call it, and it syncs up to your phone by Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and as I moved it around, it showed the acceleration and the barometric pressure and everything else. And that's when the penny dropped. Oh, I get it now. I'm instrumenting, this could be on a piece of concrete or a truck or whatever, I'm instrumenting and augmenting all these devices and able to send the information back, and the penny dropped and I understood and I got what IoT was. The problem is, you need to understand these things personally so you know what it means for you and your clients. And the next slide I'm going to show is my most photographed slide. So you might want to get your phones out already, because I guarantee a percentage of you will want to take a photograph. I call it the scary slide. And as it builds, I'm going to throw a bunch of jargon and terminology at you, and I'm going to tell you that on that screen, every one of those words will impact your business and your client's business within the next 18 months. And you might say, oh, I don't know what a few of those are, and that's okay. That's okay, because tonight, tomorrow, next week, you're going to go to Wikipedia and go, what does that mean? And then what does that mean for me? And what does that mean for my business and my client's business? And I think it's all about reinvesting and reinventing ourselves and learning about these things. So just as I learn about IoT, you can as well. Cloud computing. Now, I've been playing with ASP since 2001. I've had a website since 1994. So I've been playing with DNS and those sort of things. I thought, how do I understand cloud? So I set up my own VPN, and at home I'm a geek, so I have all of my Wi-Fi on a shared cloud server. So I spun up a cloud myself. I used DigitalOcean, it cost me $5 a month. But once I'd done that, I thought, oh, that's not so hard actually, and I understand what it is and what I'm paying for. So I would encourage you to play with this stuff. To get digital, you need to be digital. But those of you that are resellers, don't just resell. I want you to add more value. I'm not suggesting for a moment you change your whole business model and become consultants, but you need to become quasi-consultants. You need to know more than your clients are knowing. And so when they ask you about these things, can you do this or do you have this in the catalogue? You go, oh, we're working into that, or we're looking into that. You need to think like a disruptor. Back to my 3 forces slide, you need to understand where disruptors want to play, and you need to be one step ahead so you're anticipating what your clients need rather than them coming to you and you becoming a commodity. And to do that, you have to involve what I like to call disruptive innovation, a phrase coined by Clay Christensen back in 1995 when he wrote an article for Harvard Business Review. And there are 2 things that really stood out for me from Clay's article. First of all, managers must be aware of ignoring new technologies that don't initially meet the needs of their mainstream customers. Just as 20 years ago, my friends thought I was bonkers because I had this piece of plastic that I carried around. In fact, I'm so old school, I used to have a pager. Remember those? And my friends, well, why have you got a pager? Well, people need to contact me, and when they contact me, I get paid work and I earn a living. Oh, that's pretty cool. The second thing Clay said was, incumbents have a blind spot towards disruption. We don't need that. The clients don't want that. Yes, they do. Why all these services have flourished is because there was a friction point and someone solved it. So what can you do? What are the things you can think about doing tonight, tomorrow, next week? Small innovation teams. Stop doing something, put 5% of your budget towards doing something else and having people invest and research some of these things. What Barclays have done is amazing. Now, they're a big bank, I know. They've set up these offices called Barclays Rise. There's one in Shoreditch in New York and New Delhi. I encourage you to go and have a look. I was there yesterday. 4-story building, basically startups, these are fintech startups, rent a desk. And yesterday they had a graduation. The 120th startup had graduated from Barclays Rise. But Barclays get first look at these companies. They may not want to invest, but people were telling me that when people come along and mentors are there and startups are there, there's a real energy and there's a real community, and you overhear things and you meet people you wouldn't normally meet. And every audience I speak to, I encourage you to do something a bit different. Those of you that don't work in a co-working space, drop £500, go to a WeWork and work out of a WeWork for a week. Why? First of all, it'll feel quite strange. Oh, you don't wear a suit around here and it's very noisy. But secondly, you'll actually understand what it is that these disruptors are doing and why they're working the way they're working. And I was fortunate a few months ago, I got to present to the Welsh Government. Normally I get to present to disruptors that are hoping the regulators will come along. So I got a chance to talk to the regulator. They said, what you need to do is go to a WeWork. And they will actually say, well, what do you do? I'm in the Welsh Government, I'm a regulator. Oh, let me tell you how you can make our life easier. So by doing something very different, you can actually stay ahead. I'm sure all of you are aware of doing things in an agile way, but are you really agile? Try this next week. For your status meeting, take all the chairs out of the room. Your meeting will last about 15 minutes. And then the next 45 minutes, they'll be back doing what they need to be doing. Queen Victoria famously had her household meetings every week standing up, just as a Scrum meeting is done standing up. Last week I was in Barcelona speaking to Nike, and we're actually in a startup office called 21 Buttons, and as I was talking to Nike, out of the corner of my eye there was a Scrum meeting. There were 5 or 6 standing up in a circle having an update meeting. And I said to the Nike people, I'll just stop for a minute, have a look over that. That's called a Scrum meeting. What are they doing? They're having a 15-minute meeting. Wow. Did they get anything done? Yes. So think about that in an agile way. Collaboration. Now, cloud services live and breathe these collaboration tools like Slack and Chatter and Yammer. And at IBM, we had our own. And so I have first-hand knowledge of how a collaboration culture can cut through all the levels of your organization, and crazy ideas can come out of nowhere. And there's a great book by a guy called John Stepper called Working Out Loud. This is a notion of actually telling the rest of the organization and your partners and the world what you're doing or what you're working on. I'll give you an example at IBM. I would say I'm about to go and present to a bunch of people from the cloud industry. Who's presented before? Who's got a good deck? Who's got some good research? And I would have people messaging me from around the world I'd never met. It allowed me to cut through all the levels at IBM. That's a large company, and it can happen in a small company as well. Because your value to an organization isn't what you know, it's what you share. The old school thinking is, no, I'm not going to tell you what I know or what I'm working on. That's information is power. But millennials, these young leaders, they don't know anything different. They share everything they're doing. So adopt that sort of working out loud culture. Some other things that you can do very, very quickly that will have huge impact is subscribe to what I call digital diversity. Now, I'm a big proponent of diversity of gender and creed and having different people on boards. But you actually need people that are going to disrupt the thinking at a board level. So you may need to think about broadening your advisory board. If you have a formal board or advisory board, are those full of 50-year-old pale male and stale men? Often they are. In fact, tomorrow morning I'm at another event where I'm talking about this very topic exclusively. And I'm going to challenge the people. I'm going to say after I've presented, give me one reason why you are not going to change your board tomorrow. I want to know because no one seems to want to do it. And on the weekend, I was reading the Australian newspaper, which I get online, and Alan Coa, who was one of these commentators, was talking about there's a lot of issues in Australia at the moment around boards. The AMP board, the Commonwealth Bank board, these are large companies, have had some real problems, and the government has investigated and said you need to change. And he said, well, it's not just gender diversity. You actually need to, I'll read highlights and stuff. He's saying that boards that are made up of much the same people as management and the same people as each other, former CEOs, auditors and consultants, are worse than a waste of space. They set up a destructive loop. And he's right. He goes on. Every Australian board of directors should contain at least one person working in artificial intelligence and one who lives and works overseas, preferably China. So this isn't just diversity of humans, it's diversity of thinking. And the final point he says is, there should be measures and KPIs, not just on the number of women we want on boards, but also the number of people for the global people and also have credentials around technology. So take that nugget away and think, well, how is our advisory board made up? Do we have real diversity of thought? Do we build a truly digital board that sees things through a digital lens, or are we going to allow us to become a Kodak or one of those Fortune 500s that are no longer around? Think about that. Now, I've got through a whole presentation without using the M word, millennials. Who here considers themselves a millennial? Few hands wavering. I'm actually a millennial trapped in a 49-year-old body. I think and act like a millennial, even though I'm technically not one. Now, for a while I had this love-hate relationship between the nature of allowing a stereotype or a demographic to describe a group of people. In fact, at this Nike meeting last week, we were told there are now 2 types of millennials. There's young millennials and old millennials, and it's kind of right. The old millennials are in the mid to early 30s. They've got kids and several cycles of their career, and the young millennials are at the bottom end, maybe their first or second job. And I found this post on LinkedIn, and this guy said, I'm consistently amazed at how many applications I receive from university graduates looking for their first ever paid work. I don't know about you, I had 4 or 5 jobs under my belt when I left university. And Simon Sinek, who is one of these commentators on millennials, says the problem with millennials is that their parents tell them that they're wonderful and that they can do anything. And they come to work and they realise that they're not wonderful and they can't do everything. So I think there are actually 2 different tribes in every organisation. There are the going digital. Many have represented here today. We know how to influence at the highest levels. We know how to close a deal. But our digital skills are developing. Then there are the born digital. They're born with the iPhone in the mouth. They don't know how to say no, and they live and breathe digital. The 2 tribes need each other. And you can harness both these groups in your organisation. I often challenge clients, why don't you have young leaders on your board? Because they don't have the experience. That's right, they don't have the experience. They think differently. They will challenge you. They live in the cloud. The fact that there are very few young leaders here today surprises me. They're probably back at work, doing all the funky stuff, playing on Slack and doing all those sort of things, but you need to learn from them. Back to my early point, you need to disrupt yourselves or you'll be disrupted. Thank you very much.